Joining me now, RBC Capital Markets Managing Director Brad Erickson. Brad, thanks for coming on the show.
Thanks for having me. Nice to see you.
I'd like to start with that fairly simple question. While we wait for this Metaverse thing, where does Facebook's growth come from?
A few things stack up here. Number one, we're coming out of the pandemic, right? There's clearly an e-commerce hangover, whether it's Netflix or Carvana, some of these companies that were huge COVID beneficiaries. What we're seeing out of them in 2022, growth is going to be a little bit slower. Secondarily, Facebook obviously has lost some signal from Apple just in the last 9 to 12 months, and that is a headwind. Advertisers not being as willing to spend as they used to be because they can't get as good at targeting. And then the last one I'd mention is obviously everyone's been talking about TikTok the last 6 or 9 months. I think TikTok is stealing a lot of people's time and engagement over from Instagram and probably from Snap as well.
We want to get into the TikTok thing a little bit more, but first maybe a bigger picture question about what this thing's going to be when it grows up. Does Facebook and probably Twitter too eventually become a publisher responsible for the content, or should they be allowed to amplify misinformation, whatever it is? And could one cure for both of these ills be a subscription model? You'd get the recurring revenue, and maybe anybody who's willing to pay $5 or a month or whatever becomes a little more responsible.
The issue always has been at its core with kind of the scenario you just described with a subscription or a paywall, if you will, is that you just limit the number of people that are going to come onto the platform. The reason internet platforms historically are go from something to good to great is because of how pervasive they become, and of course being inclusive to as many people as possible. You go to a subscription, sure, you can curate that experience more, but inherently you're also going to limit your audience, and that's not sort of the fundamental basis on which most internet platforms are built upon.
Hey, Brad, Jack Howe, let me bring you back to growth for Instagram in particular. That's supposed to be the growth engine at Meta, but kids, to your point earlier, they only seem interested in TikTok and YouTube and Roblox. Could Instagram be like the next Netflix where they hit the wall on growth?
I think maybe a little bit of apples and oranges there, but to your question, Instagram is absolutely growing. I think what people miss, though, is Facebook Blue, the core Facebook site, is still growing very nicely from an advertising perspective as well. Facebook Blue has by far the most data, which Meta, the company, is able to leverage that data from Facebook over to Instagram. So from an engagement standpoint, sure, you're continuing to see more user growth on Instagram, more engagement growth. And so, yes, that business should sort of continue to grow. The problem is of course, if you have people falling off of Facebook Blue at an increasing rate, that becomes the headwind or the cross current, and clearly that's what Facebook is dealing with. So I expect Instagram to continue to grow, but once at a certain point when Facebook has a little bit over 1 out of 3 human beings on the earth as platform subscribers, it gets a little challenging to grow users beyond those levels.
Yeah, Brad, I'm just kind of curious, going over to the Metaverse situation. Is Facebook or Meta going to be the player here, or do you think there's a possibility that they can be the one that maybe brought voice to it, but it's going to be someone else, and Facebook will kind of be the so-called Friendster of the Metaverse?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of ways to sort of play the Metaverse, if you will, or what we assume will the Metaverse construct will sort of look like. I think Facebook, or Meta, I should call them, I think Meta is doing actually a pretty nice job of sort of being an evangelist for what the Metaverse will look like, and getting people to kind of broaden their horizons and expand their minds, so to speak, of what the Metaverse can become. But I also think that there's a ton of commercial and enterprise applications for the Metaverse that Facebook probably isn't best situated to deal in. I think what Facebook brings to the table, again, at its core, is the audience size, right? Billions of users.
Brad Erickson, when I see you in the Metaverse, I'm going to have more hair. You look pretty good. Thanks very much for this.
Thanks a lot for having me, Jack.